Everyone, and welcome to this second Facebook Live for Chronic Pain Australia's National Pain Week. I'm really excited to be hosting the Frontiers in Pain Research, and we have a great lineup of speakers today that will run through a few different projects that will be of interest to a lot of different consumers out there. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting. For me, I live and work in a Awabakal Nation, but today I'm coming from Melbourne, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also recognise the connection that First Nations people have to land, water and culture. And I understand a lot of people will be coming from various nations today, and I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to those countries as well. So for a little bit of an overview, my name is Dr. Catherine Brain, and I'm an early career researcher. I am a dietitian by trade, and I am also someone with lived experience of chronic pain. So I'm really interested in combining my personal and professional experience and passions to try and help bridge that gap between nutrition and pain, but also creating meaningful outcomes through research for consumers. So for today, we're going to be looking at a few different topics, as I've mentioned. I'd like to also acknowledge CIMRA, who is sponsoring this event, and thank you very much for your support to allow this all to happen. I'd also like to acknowledge through our National Pain Survey recently that there has been some, I suppose, disappointment from consumers in research to date, but with these presentations today and looking at some of the statistics from research through our National Pain Survey, the community is looking at, building hope through research and high quality research occurring that is at the heart of consumers' lived experience. And I think the three presentations today will certainly highlight that as well. So I'd like to start off by introducing Dr. Richard Chye. He will be speaking on the tolerability and efficacy of medicinal cannabis for chronic back and neck pain. And I'd just like to also do a quick introduction. So Dr. Chye is a senior staff specialist and director at St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney. So quite a wide range of experience, and I'll hand over to Dr. Chye to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I do acknowledge that I am presenting from Gadigal land, and I pay my respects to all those who have been on our land and provided education and also healthcare to all our patients here for generations. I do want to acknowledge Chronic Pain Australia and also CIMRA for this session. And I want to acknowledge my co-authors and people who helped in this research: Paul Blair from Royal North Shore Hospital and the University of Sydney, Mark Block and Mark Aria, and Andrew Moore, who are general practitioners who recruited patients for the study, and John Montgomery, who works with CIMRA, but also provided much needed expertise in the running of the study. And this is a tolerability and efficacy of a THC 10 milligrams and CBD 25 milligrams per mil for patients with chronic back and neck pain. And this is a phase 2 multi-dose study. I have received educational research grants from various people and also from government as well. And yes, many cannabis companies have come to me for advice. And I was an inaugural member of the Australian Advisory Council on the medicinal use of cannabis. The rationale for this study is we recognize that chronic back pain that has been around for more than 3 months, usually requires non-pharmacological approaches, exercise, rehabilitation, acupuncture, mindfulness, and not just reliant on medications, because we know there's inadequate response from medications for pain that's been around for more than 3 months. Yes, we use non-steroidals, paracetamols, opioids, none of which have been really shown to be useful in chronic pain. And regulatory agencies across the world, not only in Australia with the TGA, are increasingly placing restrictions on the use of opioids, and rightly so, for severe pain, especially when other therapies have failed, and especially for chronic pain. This is the study intervention, as I mentioned. So THC 10 milligrams per mil, 25 milligrams of CBD per mil in MCT oil. We chose this to be different from others. Yes, there are lots of other different ratios: THC 10, CBD 10, THC 10, CBD 12, CBD 15, and they are all not the same. They're not the same product. So the results from this does not translate to a different formulation. And that's what the TGA is very keen about, that we choose a formulation that's unique to us, and the studies regarding this are not translatable. In other words, another company cannot use this research for their product because they are not the same. So this is a non-randomized, single-arm, open-label study in participants with chronic back or neck pain. They are adults between 18 and 75 years, men or women, a history of pain of at least 3 months, and a pain score between 5 and 9 out of a 10-point VAS scale. We did not want patients who had 10 out of 10 pain. We also wanted patients who failed to report pain relief using over-the-counter paracetamol or non-steroidals, and also same time were willing to cease all current medications, but we were able to provide rescue medications consisting of paracetamol and ibuprofen as required. So 40 patients were screened, 28 were included in the study, and we got 24 patients through the study who reached endpoint. And yes, the mean participants were 63 years, 50% female, and had a median range of 7 to 53 years of back or neck pain, with a median of 10 years. And only 4 had some previous experience with cannabis. And yes, most had used analgesics consisting of opioids, paracetamol, non-steroidals, and others as well. We put them through a study where first the week we gave them THC 5 milligrams, and then the second week the 10, and so on until they reach a total of 30 milligrams of THC and CBD 75 milligrams per mil. And what we found was that when we got up to 20 and 30 milligrams of THC, we started to get greater than 2-point reduction in their reported pain scales, on the VAS scales, in terms of their mean reduction, but also median reduction. And we reduced them by, by 1/3. Not only did we see improvements in pain, we also saw improvements in general activity, in mood and depression, anxiety, stress. They were able to walk more, do more work, sleep better, enjoy life. But interestingly, their relationships with their partners, with their friends also improved as well. And I think you'll find with all our pain research, we don't look at pain alone, we look at all the domains that pain affects as well. So yes, this was a dose-dependent reduction in pain, and even if they were provided with rescue medications, and you can see that pain from not only from a BPI score, but from an NPRS score, all reduced over time. Also, at the same time, as the dose of THC increased, the percentage of patients who required breakthrough medications reduced as well. So half of the patients were having it when they were starting, and that reduced by almost 60% down to only 1 in 5 patients requiring breakthroughs. So it's not only pain scores that reduced, but the number of breakthrough medications they required also reduced as well. Depression reduced in a linear fashion, except when they got to 1.5 mils, and there's a p-value of less than 0.05. Anxiety also improved from baseline throughout all dose levels, but not dose dependent. There was reduction in stress from baseline in all dose, but were not dose dependent. Sleep was also improved a little, but we are still unsure about this at the moment, but it's not as clear cut. But also, most patients felt that pain improved quite a lot, or very much so, when they got up to 1.5 mils. This is only 24 patients and therefore did not reach statistical significance. And overall, 3/4 of those patients felt that the pain continued to be better 7 days after the cannabinoid was actually stopped. It was well tolerated. 93% got the starting dose, and 2/3 got to the maximum dose of the cannabinoids. There was at least 80% have one adverse event, typically mild or moderate, and that most of these experienced that not only at high doses, but also at low doses. Vomiting, dizziness, headache did not appear to be dose dependent in the mild suspect. 3 patients withdrew from the study, one from increasing constipation, which is a known side effect, anxiety. One had a faint, and we reported this as a serious adverse event, but we did not think it was due to the cannabis. And in fact, the patient continued on the cannabis before we told the patient, no, he had to stop, and did not cause any further syncopal episodes. There were no significant side effects from a blood pressure point of view, from a QTC interval point of view, which is important from a registration point of view, a TGA registration point of view, and there were no changes in important hematological and chemistry values. And during this period, there were no deaths and no pregnancies. So in conclusion, yes, we saw significant reductions in pain, even though this study was only 24 patients. We saw lots of improvements in different domains, such as depression, anxiety, stress. We found that this product was well tolerated, and basically the medication was safe. And now that we've shown that it's safe and it's well tolerated, and our measures are useful, we now go on to a larger phase 3 trial, meaning a randomized placebo-controlled trial, to make sure that we are not having issues with placebo effect and that the cannabis is a real effect. So yes, this is a phase 2 trial. It's only the start. When we met with the TGA on 2 different occasions, they recognized, and we recognized, that if we're going to call this medicinal cannabis, then this is a medicine. And the TGA and we recognize and agree that it has to be regarded as a medicine and has to go through the same regulatory framework as any other medicine. So that's why we were told we had to do a phase 2 trial, complete a phase 3 trial, and then have a start of a second phase 3 trial where before they'll allow this medication with other documentation to get onto the Australian Registry of Therapeutic Goods, the ARTG. For it to go onto the PBS, we will then also have to prove that there are economic benefits to medicinal cannabis, because I guess the TGA wants to show that it can save the health system money And we all recognize that chronic pain is a multi-billion-dollar problem for our health economy. And so by being able to use this medication to reduce chronic pain is something that we are very keen to try and prove. And I have to reiterate that this product is a unique product. There's no other product in Australia that has THC 10 and CBD 25. It is Australian grown, it is Australian processed and Australian marketed. So this is something that we are very pleased and confident about. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chye. That was really interesting information. And we have a comment from the Facebook Live just around driving and how it's, still quite difficult to use different products, particularly when THC is illegal to have in your system when driving. Would you have any comment or response on that?
Yes, I think there's only one state that is allowing patients on THC to drive, and I think that's Tasmania. THC and CBD were initially outlawed in the 1950s, and therefore it was included with stimulants, especially psychostimulants, especially ice, for example, in lots of road legislation. In New South Wales, yes, THC is in the same bucket as ice in preventing people from driving. A lot of the cannabis companies say that if you drive, or rather if you take the cannabis at night, you'll be fine to drive in the morning. And the answer is yes, you are probably competent enough to drive. However, the law says that it's not the level of cannabis, not the level of THC, that it makes it illegal to drive. Is actually the presence of THC in blood, urine, or saliva that makes it illegal to drive. And I tell my patients exactly that if they are caught, and this is a saliva test, not a breath test, then they will be found and maybe sent to court. I think the most difficult part is that with THC, if a driver was involved in an accident and the insurance companies find out that THC was involved or the driver was taking it, then there could be not only legal implications, but also insurance implications as well. So I did say that a lot of cannabis companies say that, yes, you can take the THC at night and you'll be fine to drive in the morning. That's true. However, THC stays in your body, in your blood, urine, and saliva for even up to 3 weeks. And therefore, the presence of THC makes it illegal. It is legal to drive with CBD alone, and many products in Australia have predominant CBD with a little bit of THC. In other words, there are only 2 companies that actually make and certify that their CBD products do not have THC. So they have to be very careful about that. Yes, the law needs to change. The Lambert Foundation at the University of Sydney is trying to do lots of driving tests to make sure that there is no increase in accidents when patients are on THC. But that's something for governments to be able to change. Yes, it is illegal to drive with THC or ice, but it's legal to drive with morphine, with benzodiazepines. So hopefully at some stage, the law and our lawmakers will change the law.
Yeah. So a bit of a way to go there, but it sounds like the work's being done to try and, create the evidence to show that it's okay to drive.
Yes.
A couple of other questions. We are running a little bit short of time. So I just wanted to touch on one question I think would be relevant to a lot of people, and it relates to affordability and your comment on the PBS. So do you have any idea of when these sorts of products are going to be put on the PBS, because they're quite expensive?
I think that the cost of the cannabis is going to be somewhere between $100 to $150 a month. So it's not the $500-600 a month that people are worried about. It's $100 to $150 a month. As I said, the studies need to be done on individual products, whether it's CBD alone or with THC or different combinations of THC. They need to go through the phase 2, phase 3 studies before they get onto the ARTG, and then the health economic studies before they get onto the PBS. And that, I think, was going to take somewhere between 5 and 7 years to do.
Yeah, okay. So again, there's still a little bit of time there, and a few other processes that need to happen to look at both driving and, cost, I suppose. So yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Chye. That was really informative. I've got a message that there's a couple of more minutes for another question. Let me just see. There is another question. Would you expect to see similar results in a younger cohort?
The answer is probably yes. We were looking for patients above 18 years and older, but we did not see very many patients. But I guess that also means that the number of young patients with chronic pain is not very many. And people with chronic neck or back pain, most of it is due to arthritic changes within the spine. And therefore, it's more likely to happen in the middle-aged older patient rather than a younger population. Now, yes, young patients can get chronic pain from a different cause, not from this back or neck pain. And therefore, the TGA will want to know in separate studies that cannabis helps those patients who have chronic pain, but not necessarily from a neck or back perspective.
Thanks very much for answering those questions, and thanks for your presentation. It was really interesting to hear, and hopefully some of those processes can continue to happen to make it a bit easier to access and afford some of those products. So I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, Professor Peter O'Sullivan, who's going to be talking about cognitive functional therapy for people with disabling back pain. And just briefly, for those of you that are not aware, Professor O'Sullivan is a specialist musculoskeletal physiotherapist, joining us from Curtin University School of Allied Health Sciences. Thank you, Professor O'Sullivan.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And so I'm talking about cognitive functional therapy, which is an intervention that has been designed over a period of time. But to begin with, we obviously know, and the listeners will know, about the massive impact that back pain has on their lives in terms of lost productivity, income limitation, getting out of work early, etc. And we've heard just now about some of the disappointments around existing treatments, that often a lot of treatments out there provide limited or short-term benefits. And so there are very few interventions that offer significant long-term benefits for people with chronic low back pain. And often these interventions are linked to negative messaging, and we've seen that through a number of our studies. If we look at the voices of people who are living with low back pain, they tell us a number of things. They tell us that their beliefs are that their body or their structures of their body are vulnerable and impacted, and this is often informed through imaging and clinician information. They often feel distressed and disabled, and this is often linked to a failure of healthcare. They often feel stigmatized and invalidated. They describe their pain as often threatening and fearful, unpredictable and disruptive. It impacts on all aspects of their lives, including their function, feel uncertain for the future, and have a sense of loss of identity. And they describe that their strategies to control pain become things like hypervigilance, of protection, avoidance of activity and movement, and things that give life value, use of medication, although often it's not beneficial. And then these strategies to kind of control this assault of their sense of self, which often links to social withdrawal or trying to push through, or a juggling act between selecting the things that they do or the things they don't do. And then this often links to a sense of acceptance that is often associated with despair. There are many people in our society just give up and think this is their lot. So we ask people living with pain what they want from us as clinicians, then they're pretty clear that they want to be deeply listened to, validated, and to work in partnership with us. They want to understand what's going on. They want to know what the contributing factors are and what the consequences are for their problem through their life. And they also want to plan for recovery. They want control over their pain. They want to get back to the things that they love and improve their quality of life. And they want to have strategies where they can learn to do this themselves and not just reliant on people to try and fix them. And they want that delivered in a clear and consistent and personalized way, and language that's understandable. So this intervention's really tried to take the voices of people living with pain and to develop an intervention that's person-centered, to take people who may be in pain and are disabled and are distressed, to kind of bridge the gap, to go, how do we get people living like this back to living again? And so there are this is a mind-body approach, which has three key elements. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And the first part is to try and help people make sense of their pain through an understanding of all the factors that might be relevant in their life. And that's through a detailed interview and examination. And the second part is this building confidence in the body. So this idea of learning to relax the body, reconnect with the body, build trust back in the body, re-engage with movements and activity, and then generalize that back into things that they value in life, activities of daily living, re-engaging in work, and the things that they love. And the third part is addressing issues around lifestyle, of re-engaging in physical activity based on their preference, helping strategies around sleep, re-engaging socially. And this is a very individualized approach. So it's the factors are different for each person. The goals are different for each person, but the goals of the person becomes the target of the treatment. And this is like a coaching program where the practitioner partners with the person in pain to build confidence, to teach them to be back in control. It takes about 5 to 8 sessions over 12 weeks with a booster session if required. So we just published a paper, which is a large randomized control trial in the Lancet journal. This was a 2-site trial. So it was a group in Perth and a group in Sydney. We had 18 physiotherapists. We trained up over 6 months to deliver this intervention to people with chronic pain. So who were in the trial? We had about 500 people with chronic low back pain. We included anyone from over the age of 18. This included people from all ages, right up into the 80s. We looked at people who'd had pain for an average of 4 years. So this is a substantial burden. People in this trial were more disabled than most previous trials of low back pain. And many had given up in care. In fact, we saw about 50% of people had just said they'd tried everything and given up. So we had 3 groups. The CFT, or the Cognitive Functional Therapy group, had up to 7 treatments over 12 weeks and a booster session at 6 months. And then we had an extra group, which was to receive this treatment, but they had these biofeedback movement sensors that gave them feedback around how they used their body, how they moved. We were looking to see whether this actually added benefit to the intervention. And the usual care group had no restriction on the kind of care that they had, but most were seeing their GP, some were seeing physiotherapists, a number of them, well, most of them were on some kind of medication for their pain. So the primary outcome for this trial was pain-related activity limitation. We saw significant reductions in levels of disability in both of these groups, the CFT and the CFT movement sensor group, compared to usual care. And this lasted out to 1 year, so well after the intervention had finished. And this was manifest in terms of what we call clinically important differences, a reduction of 5 points on this disability measure, that 67% of people in the CFT group were significantly or clinically better, a large clinical benefits compared to only 24% of people in the usual care group. We also saw this mirrored in significant reductions and sustained reductions in pain intensity levels. So in the 2 cognitive functional therapy groups, we saw this reduction in pain. And in terms of clinically important difference, over half at 12 months were reporting significant reductions in pain compared to 25% in the usual care arm. We also saw differences or reductions in other things that we measured, like reduction in pain-related disability, a reduction in the levels of distress, and increased confidence in engaging in activities of daily living and functional activities. And this was significant in the 2 cognitive functional therapy groups compared to usual care arm. When we did a cost analysis, we found that there were really large cost savings as well. So there were a minimum of $5,000 per person per year were saved in relation to re-engagement and work, and paid and non-paid work. So these are quite significant benefits from a cost point of view as well, when you're looking at the whole impact that pain has on a person's life. And really importantly, over 80% of people were either satisfied or highly satisfied with the treatment. And interestingly, we were re-engaging people in previously feared and avoided activities. And we found that it was safe, that people weren't worse for re-engaging. And often there's a lot of concern around re-engaging with movement and activities, that it will make the person worse. And in fact, we found they were better, and it was we didn't see any adverse events. Now, I'd love to just talk you through the story of people who've gone through this intervention, because I think it helps us understand a little bit about what this intervention means for people with pain. Whoops. So this idea of, sorry, I've just jumped. The journey beginning where the person develops pain and they feel stressed. They might have had an injury or been sick or unwell, and they have these negative experiences of negative messages about the body, failed treatments, feeling unheard and dismissed, getting to a position where they've gone through all these treatments and just feel stuck. Some have dropped out of care. They feel in pain, they're distressed, they're frightened, they feel tense and weak and vulnerable. And then they kind of go into this journey with the practitioner through cognitive functional therapy, where they brought their story, a sense of hope and courage and desire for partnership. And the clinicians brought kindness, empathy, listening, and a sense of partnership to work with that person. They describe this process of becoming aware of the body, of learning to relax and move without protection, of re-engaging, building confidence back in the body. They describe the importance of their story being heard, of having time and space to tell the story where often that had not happened. They described this sense of making sense of pain, of understanding how their thoughts, emotions, stresses, behaviors, and body responses impacted on their pain, and developing a sense of control and confidence to relax and move and get back to things that they loved in their life. They describe the importance of re-engaging in healthy lifestyle, might be involving sleep, exercise, social engagement, but also the importance of a partnership to negotiate challenges and flare-ups along the way, and the sense of getting back to living, and then growth in other aspects of their life. So that was the kind of themes that we heard from people who'd gone through this intervention, of the sense of feeling like they were in control, that they weren't reliant on seeking care. They might be still having some ongoing medication, but they felt a sense of autonomy. So what does this trial tell us? I think it tells us that there is hope, that we can offer a different pathway for people living with chronic low back pain. That there are different ways of working or new ways of working that can support people with pain. We know from this trial that it took up to 6 months to train the physiotherapist to deliver this kind of intervention. And it's a completely different way of working than traditionally taught. And so there's a whole role here of the clinician working not so much just as a treater, but as very much as in partnership and as a coach. So this idea of partnering with people with pain rather than just being a recipient of care. And this idea of putting people living with pain in the driver's seat so they start to take control, have a sense of autonomy, a sense of having the tools to manage their pain day to day. Now, the problem we have is that one is we need to upskill a workforce to deliver this care, but the other major issue we have is the funding models don't really support this kind of care. For example, funding models for people with seeing a physiotherapist are often paid per session, where we actually spent more time with the people in this trial. So an hour for an initial consultation, at least a half an hour for a follow-up. And so the funding models don't support that time. And so we're going to have to see a shift in the funding models to support access to this kind of care. So there are two elements that we're interested. Number one is upskilling clinicians to deliver it. And number two is lobbying funders to support that kind of care as well. Now, if you're interested in more about this trial, we have a website called restorebackpain.com. And in that website are a number of videos, and you'll see on the left a number of videos of people telling their story through this intervention. And these are people of all ages who have, all of them, where pain has had a devastating impact on their life. And they will talk through the journey for each one of them being different of how it was to go from feeling like they're stuck to getting back to living again. And if you're interested in the trial, that website also highlights that, but this was published in the Lancet Journal and the trial is available here. But the website restorebackpain.com gives quite detailed breakdown of what that trial means. And of course, I need to acknowledge all the collaborators, the people in this trial, particularly Peter Kent, who is a colleague of mine who was the primary leader of this intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It actually really resonates with me and my personal experiences with pain. So it's really exciting and I think brings that hope that I spoke about earlier to other people experiencing pain as well. I just wondered if you could explain a little bit for those listening online what overprotection means.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research around people who live with back pain. And essentially what we've found is that when we look at the way people use their body, when we have pain, the body goes into this protective mode. And often people describe the stiffness or tension, muscles tense up. There's this protective guarding that goes on. And part of that subconscious, it's like the body's protective response to tense up. And we often describe this as about like clenching the fist around a sore wrist. It's a body's response, but it actually can make you worse. The other thing we know is that there are a whole lot of beliefs that people hold around back pain that, if you've got a back pain, you've got to sit up straight, brace your core, be careful when you bend, lift with a straight back. And we've done a number of studies looking at this. And in fact, what we find is that when people with back pain tend to be more guarded, protective, they move slower, they move stiffer. As they improve, they tend to relax their bodies. They tend to move more naturally. They tend to relax in the chair. They tend to bend without guarding their back. They don't brace their core. And so this idea of protecting your body actually doesn't help. And through this intervention, we actually coach people not to protect their body, which sounds counterintuitive. But in actual fact, it gives pain relief. And that often comes as a shock to people because they've often been coached to protect their body by being told, careful when you lift with a straight back, don't lift with a round back, use your knees when you go to bend over. And these are things that we see become very much overprotected, which actually are not helpful in a lot of cases, which we try and train people out of. And we did that in the trial.
Yeah, I often think, people at work, it's like, oh, sit up straight at your computer
Yeah.
and things like that, but
Yeah.
it's not always natural. Yeah.
No, it's not. And, there's a huge industry that kind of promotes these messages, but the evidence behind it's actually really, really poor. And in fact, it kind of leads to this unhelpful over attention on the body, that you're trying to protect this painful part of your body, which actually makes it worse.
Yeah. Just very quickly, there's a comment from the chat. Trying to override that subconscious overprotective mechanism is the biggest challenge.
It is absolutely the case. Yeah. And that's why we say you need to work in partnership with a really skilled clinician, because they will teach you strategies to do that. And if you listen to some of those stories, you'll hear the importance of breathing. Like, people talk about that ability to just be in the body, to relax the body, to breathe, to relax, to not respond to pain by tensing, and because often pain causes fear and anxiety, which makes you tense. Actually learning strategies to not do that is really tough, but it's possible. And we've shown that in our research, that you can learn to change that process with time.
Thank you very much for that. And as I said, it brings a lot of hope, I think, through what you've said, and that there is a way forward for a lot of people. And I also like what you said too around, it's one aspect that people can focus on.
Exactly. Well. Yeah. Cool. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'd now like to introduce Professor Sylvia Gustin, who's going to speak on innovative brain technology for the treatment of chronic pain. So Professor Gustin is a senior research fellow and registered psychologist working with Neura and also the University of New South Wales. Thank you, Professor Gustin.
Hello, everyone. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. And I also extend that respect to Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So I'm very excited to present some of the work we're doing over the last 10 years using innovative brain technology for the treatment of chronic pain. So let's get started. We all know that pain is much more than only an awful feeling. It's very emotional. It affects our emotions, it affects our thinking, our cognition, it affects our relationships, it affects the way we are. So it is very emotional. And I can say that as a clinician working since over 20 years with people with chronic pain, I feel the emotions and I see the emotions. But I'm not only a clinical psychologist, I've also specialized in brain imaging. So looking into the brain and researching the brain mechanism underlying chronic pain. And what we found is very interesting. So we found that chronic pain results in a change in a chemical messenger called GABA in the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex sits directly before the forehead. And we know that this area, the medial prefrontal cortex, is responsible for processing emotions. So a decrease in GABA means that over the time, the brain cells' ability to communicate with each other is disrupted. So they can't anymore communicate properly with each other. It's like a lot of people use different languages and they can't anymore understand each other. And this loss of the brain cells' communication results in an overactivity of the brain and leading to increasing emotional distress and worsening pain. And what is really needed is to calm this overactive brain down, to calm our emotions down, and hopefully then also reducing pain, physical suffering, and the emotional suffering. So I think it is very important to really look at emotions and help people to regulate them better, because a lot of times in my practice, I see people are stigmatized. So I hear that so many times that a client says, look, people told me, it's easy, you need only to feel better, but it's not that simple. It's actually not that simple, because we have a pathological reason underlying it. So we actually need to teach the brain again a good way how to regulate negative emotions. And this is the reason why we have developed the emotional recovery program. And this program is based on dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's a skills training. It's in a group session, so it's all online. And I believe
Sorry, Sylvia, just before you keep going, we can't see your PowerPoint slides.
Oh, okay, sorry. Because okay. Let me. Thank you.
All right. There's a green share button at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I've done that all. Okay. Oops. Yeah, that should all work.
Oh, yep, it's coming up now.
Okay. Okay. I'm very sorry about that. I talk about brain technology and I don't have any idea about technology. So sorry, guys.
Right.
But quickly, so this is a nice slide basically, but I hope you understand what I said about the brain changes in the brain which underline emotional dysregulation. So due to time commitment, I have to continue, but very sorry. So the way we want to train and change the brain again, that people can hopefully regulate their emotions better, is we have developed the emotional recovery program, and it's a group session based program. Our consumers really like that it's group sessions, because a few of them told me, I've never met somebody else with chronic pain. So it's very healing when you actually talk to other people with chronic pain. It's online, which I think is very important, because we have a lot of people living in regional and rural areas and people with disability. It's very difficult to access pain treatments. So I think it's really important to think about e-technology. So our group sessions are 6 sessions. They are all 60 to 90 minutes long. And we teach our clients skills how to better regulate their emotions. So we teach them 2 sessions about mindfulness, how to incorporate chronic pain, because you can't push away chronic pain. You can't push emotions away. So you need to find a way how to incorporate it in the present moment. 3 sessions about emotional regulation. So we teach skills how to better regulate your emotions. It's skills like opposite action, check the facts, coping ahead. So a lot of different skills, and also distress tolerance skills. So basically when emotions and pain is overwhelming. I always say to our clients, it's like I give you a wardrobe full of skills, and whenever you think a skill is needed, then you take out the skills which you think is the appropriate one. We also provide a handbook, and we provide an app, because only listening is not really helping. You need to train it, and the best way to train it is basically with a web app. So with the web app, it's very so with the web app, you can teach, you can train all the skills we are providing, and I think this is very powerful, and our clients really liked it, that they can train it on a daily basis. We have done a small trial about it, and it was successful. So we published this in the Journal of Pain, and we saw a reduction in emotion regulation difficulties and also in pain intensity. But small trials, we have to, basically, it's very important to test always in a proper RCT, in a large trial. So this is currently what we are doing, and we have completed our recruitment. We have done a randomized controlled trial against treatment as usual. We just completed it. We don't know the results yet, but it's promising, and I think our clients are believe it's very beneficial for them to really have a set of skills and to use them whenever is needed. We might do another group. It depends always on resources because it depends on staff. If you're interested, I will give you an email address and our at the end of this talk. And then if you're interested, write us an email. And if we do another group, we are very happy to include all of you. So now we've talked a lot about the emotions, but what is with basically the quality of pain? What is with the pain experience? Can we also do something with that? And I would like to show that what we're doing on the example of spinal cord injury nerve pain. So we know that approximately 50% of people with a spinal cord injury develop nerve pain in areas where they can't feel and can't move. And that's nerve pain. It's awful. It's stabbing, sharp shooting. And we also know that there's very little out there. It's very little pharmacological and non-pharmacological treatment. And if we want to develop better treatments, we really need to understand what is going on. So let's go back again into the brain. So what we discovered was that the area where movement and sensation is represented in the brain is actually shrunk. And the more it is shrunk, the more people have developed nerve pain. So when you are a basic scientist and basically you reveal this, we really would like to develop new treatments to increase that area and basically then to reduce pain. And the idea came up using virtual reality. So basically tricking the brain that the brain thinks it's really walking, really touching, and by tricking the brain, increasing this area and hopefully reducing pain. So this is what we're currently doing. So we are doing a randomized trial using virtual reality to decrease nerve pain after spinal cord injury. We have done a small trial in the States with 30 people published in the Journal of Pain. And that showed that we can actually decrease the pain by tricking, decreasing the pain by tricking the brain, that the brain thinks it's real, and then by increasing this area. The way it works, it's very immersive. Whenever you move your upper body to the right or to the left, so this movement gets signaled back into the virtual reality experience and creates that feeling that you're really walking and then you're really tricking the brain. So as I said, we have done a small pilot trial with 30 people. It was very successful. And that was the reason why we got funded by the US Department of Defense to do a proper large clinical trial. And at the moment we are recruiting, we recruit across Australia. We are recruiting spinal cord injury people who have developed nerve pain. And if you're interested or you know somebody, please let them know. We are sending the virtual reality goggles to everybody, so everybody in Australia can take part. I'm very proud. We have people from Tasmania, from Perth, from Darwin. So I think it's home-based solution is really what we need to develop in the future. If you're interested, you can also come to the University of New South Wales and we do a brain scan because we are always interested about what the brain is doing when we recover from pain, but it's not needed. But it is a possibility. If you want to fly to Sydney, we cover all costs. And there is one last treatment we are using. This is brain-computer interface. So what we also know from research is that nerve pain has a specific electrical brain signature. So the way the thalamus, who lies in the middle of the brain, the way the thalamus talks to the sensation cortex is disrupted. And we can actually measure this disruption. We can measure it with EEG. What we know is that people with ongoing nerve pain have an increase in slow waves like theta. And people without pain, they have a lot of alpha waves. So also knowing this, knowing the brain, what the brain is doing while having chronic pain is really what I think what we need to do is develop treatments, non-invasive treatments to neuromodulate the brain in a way to reduce pain. And this is also what we are doing here. So we have developed a neurofeedback treatment and we actually developed our own EEG cap. So basically, participants have to put the EEG cap on the head. Then the EEG signals get recorded and sent to a computer. And via a game, participants will then learn how to regulate their brain rhythms in a way which reduces pain. So this is still in development. It's not finished yet, but I think it's very promising. And I think it's also promising for non-neuropathic pain, because what we know more and more in the literature is that people who have non-neuropathic pain, musculoskeletal pain, for example, back pain or temporomandibular disorder, show also a similar electrical signature. So this might be also something for people with non-neuropathic pain. We got funding to do this trial in spinal cord injury, people with nerve pain, but I think if it's successful, this could really be translated to other pain disorders. And so the idea is really to change the brain in a way, to neuromodulate the brain waves in a way which reduces pain. And it's always what my clients are asking me, how can you do it? And basically what we want is that people develop their own strategies. And what we know is when the jellyfish will swim in the blue ocean, then we know the optimal brain signature is reached. And I don't know if you can see this. You might hear even the music. So basically, participants have to develop their own strategies that the jellyfish swims in the blue ocean. And this is, it sounds simple, but it's not simple. It's hard work because you really need to find your own strategies. And this is very powerful. If our brain finds its own strategies, then basically it has learned these strategies. And basically we have changed the memory and hopefully decreasing pain. So this is my last slide. And if you're interested in our trials, in our research, then please go to www.neurorecoveryresearch.com. We have also an email, neurorecoveryresearch@unifnewsouthwales.edu.au. We are very happy to speak to you. Have a look in our trials if you're interested, and reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. A quick question from the comments is, how did you get funding from the United States for your project?
That's a very good question. So basically, there is a lot of spinal cord injury people in the States, and they were very interested in our research because what we know is that a lot of medication is not working. And they really like the idea based on neuroscience to change how the brain works. So they were very interested in the US Department of Defense. There's a lot of military and a lot of spinal cord injury. So this is the reason that they were very interested, because of basically the basic science we are doing and then all the development.
Thank you. So just wanted to thank everyone for speaking today, and for those joining live, and if you're watching this recording, thank you for dropping in. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about what's happening in the research space. There's a few other events for National Pain Week this week, so feel free to drop in on Facebook and have a look at the program and see what else is happening. But I'd just like to wrap up there and thank everyone for both joining and the speakers for presenting as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.